This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. I am Dr. Duke, and today I'm joined by Alex Newman. Alex, thanks for joining us very much.
Great to be here.
So we're going to talk about college kids, some of the most privileged, entitled people in the entire world. I mean, these college kids are getting federal loans. They are being dumbed down in the classrooms. We're taking kids into college who really can't do the work. Everybody's getting socially promoted. These are the most privileged kids anywhere, perhaps, in the history of the world. And now they are engaging in limousine liberalism because they're standing 100% behind the murderers from Hamas, right? So, it doesn't matter if you've got beheaded babies charred to ashes. It doesn't matter if you've got women being raped and sodomized. That doesn't matter. The killing of women and elderly people don't bother the woke crowd. They stand with Hamas. Let's start with a quick video from Fox News about Lawrence Jones confronting some of these teachers, these kids in the colleges, and we'll turn it over to you.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Why are you here today?
Free Palestine. I stand with the Palestinian people unequivocally.
I support decolonization and liberation of Palestinian people and the end of a mass genocide in the Gaza Strip.
You're talking about the genocide of the kids being beheaded?
That's false. That is actually false.
When you see the kids that have been beheaded and the women that are raped, how do you feel about that?
I don't know where to start from that.
Israel is notorious for creating propaganda that sides their one-sided massacre against Palestinians.
That was already proven that didn't really happen. There was not verified.
Women did not get raped.
No. I've not seen any proof of that. If it did happen, I haven't seen it.
Like, they get attacked for no reason.
The children got attacked for no reason? The kids that were beheaded?
Beheaded? Yeah, apparently.
But they were Jewish kids.
Wait, Jewish kids?
The U.S. military money that goes there, $4 billion a year, should stop going to Israel to support their war crimes.
No proof, Alex, just no proof that ever happened because, the Israelis, they make up propaganda, so it didn't happen.
Yeah, we've heard that before. It's pretty amazing. But what we're seeing here, Duke, and I've been talking about this for about a week now, the cause of jihad has really been, fueled in part by the communist movement. The General Ion Pacepa, who was the head of Romanian intelligence, back in the 50, 60 years ago, he defected to the West, and he wrote a bunch of books, including one called Disinformation, where he outlines this plan that he and Yuri Andropov, the head of the KGB, worked on to send thousands of communist agents into the Muslim world, into the Middle East, to radicalize further Islamists, to use them as a battering ram against the United States and Israel. They were teaching them that America is the great Satan, Israel is the little Satan. And so the communists have been a major force in driving a lot of this terrorism that we see, not just Hamas, but also, the Palestine Liberation Organization and many other radical groups. And so it shouldn't be surprising that Marxist universities are allied with allies of the Marxists. You have this bizarre, almost nonsensical alliance between communists and Islamists. And I think the reason why they're allied together is pretty simple. They have a common enemy, America, Christians, Christian values, liberty. And once, in their view, they finish destroying those things, they can settle their own differences later.
And don't forget the incredible amount of money the Chinese and the Saudis, others, are pumping into the universities to get exactly this kind of results. As a matter of fact, in the news today, China is demanding that American universities become more sympathetic to the Palestinians. So we have another video that shows us what's going on at Harvard University. Take a look.
At Harvard, its Palestinian solidarity groups initially releasing a joint statement holding the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all the unfolding violence.
At the end of the day, this is a group that seeks the destruction of the Jewish race, and it's not the right time to be issuing a pro-Palestinian statement.
Backlash quickly ensued, a professor posting a photo of a truck driving around campus showing photos, which he redacted, of some of the students who signed the statement. Some groups formally apologizing and retracting their signatures protesters, while over 4,000 members of the Harvard community signed a counter statement.
There's a lot of tension. A lot of people have missed class.
Harvard's president condemning the terrorist atrocities perpetuated by Hamas, emphasizing that the student body does not speak for Harvard University.
I feel like Harvard very visibly and loudly stood by Israel, but I don't hear the same frustration for the blood that's been shed for the Palestinians.
Students across the country wondering whose voices will be loudest.
Yeah, and it is remarkable, Alex. And the thing that unites all of these stories is the historical ignorance about what actually is happening. They think that Israel was never a Jewish territory. They think that somehow it is Israel persecuting these Palestinians when the Arabs around them don't want any part of them. Right now, what Egypt is telling the Palestinians, you stay there and get bulldozed. We are not letting you into our country. And this is interesting, Alex. Why is it that in America, if we don't take everybody across the border, including killers and drunk drivers and terrorists, we don't take them in, we're evil. AOC is calling for 1 million Palestinians to be repatriated here. And when the Arab countries that could easily absorb these Palestinians, give them better education, give them hospitals, give them better nutrition, want no part of them, but Israel, where they work, where they join the parliament, they become part of the government, they dine, gay Palestinians, female Palestinians, way more rights and civil rights and opportunities in Israel than they have any place else in the Arab world. And these kids in college know absolutely nothing about it.
Yeah, there has been a number of false narratives deliberately concocted over the years, I think partly to keep this perpetual conflict going. But one of the things that you see, for example, is this whole identity of Palestinian. This is a new term, right? The Palestine Mandate, I mean, that goes back to, the Roman times. The British had the Palestine Mandate, and then they decided to do the two-state solution. And one state was to be Arab. One state was to be for the Jews. And of course, the Arabs got their state. It was called Transjordan. And then Jordan, the Jews got their state. Now, the Jews allowed Arabs to remain in their state. In fact, there are about 2 million Arab citizens of Israel. They're full citizens. They enjoy all the benefits, rights, and protections of any other citizen of the state of Israel. But they've created this notion of a Palestinian that somehow has been dispossessed. That's not to say that there's never been anything bad that has happened there, but the Palestinian identity itself is really a recent innovation. It's been manufactured, I think, partly for propaganda purposes. And you make a really good point. There really are very little difference between this group of Arabs or that group of Arabs. Some of them come from different tribes and stuff, but they're all Arabs. And so why can these Arabs who need to come to the United States or supposedly need to have all the territory that the Jews have, why can't they join Egypt? Why can't they join Jordan or Syria or Iraq or any of the Arab states in the vicinity there? And the reason is there are evildoers who want to exploit this perpetual conflict for political and subversive purposes, and we're watching that play out right now.
Before we take the break, I want to show you a letter from Harvard. Take a look at this. This is a joint statement by Harvard Palestine solidarity groups on the situation in Palestine. We, the undersigned, student organizations, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence. Today's events did not occur in a vacuum. For the last 2 decades, millions of Palestinians have been forced to live in an open-air prison. Are you kidding me with this? Israeli officials promised to open the gates of hell against the massacres that were done against them. Palestinians in Gaza, we're told, have no shelters for refuge, and that's because the Egyptians won't allow it. Nowhere to escape. In the coming days, Palestinians will be forced to bear the full brunt of Israel's violence, and no acknowledgement that this was triggered by Hamas. I mean, this kind of stuff. Now, the good news, and we're going to talk about this after the break. The good news is that there are a lot of people pushing back, a lot of major companies and donors withdrawing money from Harvard and literally trying to come up with a list of people who participate in this, who they will never hire. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. So, Alex Newman, I want to get your thoughts on this. These 32 organizations at Harvard, student-led, condemning Israel and blaming them. Here you get a sense of all the places, the committees, the organizations on campus who are standing with Hamas and blaming Israel exclusively for the violence. How do you parse this, Alex?
Well, I think there are a lot of useful idiots, and we really should not be surprised by this takeover of academia. This has been a long time coming. You've been warning about it for a long time, the Marxist takeover of the universities. And again, to go back to what we talked about in the first segment, there is a very real red-green axis. I don't want to downplay the significance of Islamic theology, right? It's not a new phenomenon that jihadists are waging jihad and head chopping and killing Jews and Christians. In fact, if you go all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad, he was engaged in those sorts of things. If you go back to North Africa for a long time was almost completely Christian. The Islamic armies marched through there and forced conversions, beheaded a lot of people. They tried to do the same in Europe. They tried to take over the Iberian Peninsula, which they held for centuries. They tried to take over France. They were stopped by Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours. They tried to take over, the Ottomans did, the other way through Vienna, and thankfully they were stopped by the King of Poland. Jan Sobieski came down with his forces and they turned them back. So it's not a new phenomenon. But this bizarre or seemingly bizarre alliance with the communists is very, very troubling. And one more thing that's especially troubling and should be especially troubling to Americans, Duke, is the role that the U.S. government is playing in all this. Right? We know Joe Biden just released billions of dollars to the mullahs in Iran who are funding the Hamas terrorists. We know that for many, many years the U.S. government has been pouring money down this rat hole called the UNRWA, the Relief and Works Administration. These are the people producing the textbooks teaching little Arab children that Jews are pigs and monkeys and they need to be slaughtered and driven into the sea. So there's this deliberate agenda to stir up this constant hatred, and there's this deliberate alliance between the Reds and the Greens, the communists and the Islamists. And it's now in our cities. I mean, if you look, there are these pro-Hamas rallies in London, in Montreal, in Toronto, in New York, at Harvard. This is now ubiquitous, and it's now taken over our higher education system. People don't quite understand the significance of this, but this is not going to end well.
Well, we do have some pushback. We have here a tweet from an X from Bill Ackman. He's a billionaire hedge fund manager. And he says the following: I have been asked by a number of CEOs if at Harvard would release a list of the members of each of these Harvard organizations that have issued the letter assigning sole responsibility for Hamas's heinous acts to Israel, so as to ensure that none of us inadvertently hire any of their members. If, in fact, their members support the letter they have released, the names of the signatories should be made public so their views are publicly known. One should not be able to hide behind a corporate shield when issuing statements supporting the actions of terrorists who we now learn have beheaded babies, among other inconceivably despicable acts. And so there is some moral clarity here. And one of my concerns, Alex, is that we have a lot of Jewish liberals in America who are anti-God, anti-American, anti-Christian. They are anti-free markets, people who have made their money, who maybe now are awake because what's going on in Israel. But in every other way, they seem to be, and this is not just Jewish people, it's liberals and progressives generally, but these are the people who now seem to have some empathy for Israel, but don't seem to realize that everything they've supported for the last 30, 40 years in this country has led to this. It's very puzzling to me.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. And, there's a very broad range of views in the Jewish community. I've been hearing from Jews from all across the spectrum in the aftermath of this. You and I have developed some relationships with some of the Jewish leaders in New York whose schools are being targeted for shutting down. Some of them come from, the ultra-Orthodox Haredi side of the spectrum, and they want to dismantle the state of Israel. Then you have, other Jews, including some that you and I know very well, who actually want to pay money for the Arabs to leave Israel so that the Israelis can have a kind of a Jewish state of their own. So there's this broad diversity of views. But, for the most part, I think Jews are largely united in their defense of Israel. But you also have, these different strains. And, I think there is some some segment of the population that's a little bit conflicted between their loyalty to the left and their loyalty to the state of Israel. And we're seeing that play out right now within the Democratic Party, right? The polling now shows a radical shift among Democrats where a lot now are openly siding with the Arabs and against the state of Israel. So I think this really has profound geopolitical implications, and it has profound implications for American politics as well.
Yeah, and so I want to talk to you before we end this because Ben Sasse, who was a former senator, United States senator from Nebraska, I've had my issues with him. He certainly was a bit of a rhino. He was very anti-Trump. He was not helpful in helping move the country the right way. He's now the president of the University of Florida. So now, even though he's a rhino Republican, he's probably the most conservative guy anywhere on the Florida campus. But he did something really remarkable. He actually wrote a letter that is a how-to to handle this. He was incredibly harsh and accurate and fearless about offending the left on college campuses. I want to read a little of this to you. He says, like you, I am tremendously grateful for our students. The University of Florida is home to the largest number of Jewish students at any university in this country. We are honored by that and committed to that legacy. Our Jewish students and alumni around the world have been devastated by Hamas. I will not tiptoe around this simple fact. What Hamas did is evil, and there is no defense for terrorism. This shouldn't be hard. Sadly, too many in elite academia have been so weakened by their moral confusion that when they see videos of raped women, hear of beheaded babies, or learn of a grandmother murdered in her home, the first reaction of some is to provide context and try to blame the raped women, beheaded babies, or the murdered grandmother. In other grotesque cases, they express simple support for the terrorists. This isn't just wrong. It's sickening. It is It's dehumanizing. It is beneath people called to educate our next generation of Americans. I am thankful to say I haven't seen examples of that here at UF, either from faculty or our student body. I mean, this is about as strong a statement as you can make, Alex. No hedging, no equivocation. And again, he's right. I mean, this is a remarkable thing to remember. There are more Jewish kids at the University of Florida than any other university in this country. And so he has an obligation to them, but he's still standing squarely and vociferously on the side of right in this. And can you name another university president who said anything like this anywhere in the world?
No, it's a very good point. And, there are even Arabs who are speaking out on this. There's a great Arab Christian community that absolutely rejects the actions of Hamas. And so it's good to see, at least here in Florida and at least in some quarters, some clarity on this. You really wouldn't think it would be that complicated to figure out that people who slaughter deliberately women, children, and innocent, unbelievable. You wouldn't think that it would be very difficult to come out and say, that's wrong, that should be condemned. But apparently, in the modern era, especially in American academia, that has become difficult.
It is. And, it's hate speech. This is the other thing that no one wants to talk about. The left, particularly campus left, it's all about hate speech, right? If you misgender somebody with the wrong pronouns, if you dare to suggest that there's another side to the world than woke politics, they want to cancel you. They call you engaging in hate speech. But basically standing behind the murderous Hamas and endorsing the kind of murders we've seen. How in the world is that not hate speech? That, my friends, is the definition of hate speech. And of course, if it weren't for the hypocrisy of the progressive left, they'd have nothing left.
That's exactly right. And, there's almost a silver lining to this in that the mask is coming off now. But I think, folks, we need to be really aware because this extremism, this kind of radicalism isn't just going to be isolated to protests and things like that. We've had an open border now for several years. We've had millions of unvetted illegals come into this country. Many of them are sympathetic with Hamas. Many of them are sympathetic with Islamic Jihad. Many of them are special forces from communist dictatorships. So, folks, beware. This is not going to end well. It's time to take this real seriously.
And that's going to wrap up the show. If you enjoy the program, please subscribe to our podcast channel. Simply search Dr. Duke Show on your favorite free platform. And don't forget to follow us on Rumble. Visit rumble.com/FreedomProject. For all of us at the show and for Alex Newman, thanks, and we'll see you next time.